Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. As you just heard, my name is Alexander Leslie. I was formerly a senior threat intelligence analyst with the Advanced Cybercrime and Engagements team at Recorded Future. I now lead our global affairs team as a senior advisor on government relations. I'm based in Washington, D.C., and I have a lot of experience dealing with state-sponsored actors, particularly out of North Korea. This is my colleague, Scott. If you introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Scott Kardas. I'm a geopolitical threat intelligence analyst with the Geopol team at Recorded Future. I have extensive experience in the Korean Peninsula and dealing with North Korea.
Cool. So if you don't know about Recorded Future, we are the world's largest and leading cyber threat intelligence company. We are currently owned by MasterCard. Everything that you see in this presentation can be photographed. It is on the record, and it is all from public sources. So it can be attributed in future talks, commentary, reporting, and everything else. So it's going to be more of a strategic talk focused on the intersection between various clusters of advanced persistent threat groups that we attribute to North Korea, their purpose, their mission, how they fit within the Reconnaissance General Bureau's chain of command and control structure, and their overlying motives. So I'll pass it off to Scott to begin.
Yeah. So I'm kind of operating on the assumption that everyone knows roughly about North Korean IT workers. So we've estimated that they have about 10,000 workers globally. When I say globally, they're not all located in North Korea. They are operating out of places like China, Russia, and increasingly Southeast Asia, specifically Laos. And these workers are earning about $600 million a year, or up to $600 million a year. And that is their gross. Sorry, that is their net, not their gross. They actually earn more, but they lose some through traditional money laundering costs. As you see in the bottom right picture, my wonderful artwork there, it kind of depicts some of the payment flows that they have if they go through cryptocurrency or through traditional financial institutions. And these IT workers have three main goals. Their first goal is to generate money. Because North Korea is cut off from the global financial system, it's hard to get foreign currency to conduct international trade. And they use these funds to develop their ballistic missile programs, their nuclear program, or other offensive cyber operations. They also like to use these IT workers to conduct state-sponsored espionage. They will go after government institutions, defense contractors, or think tanks, anyone who they believe can give information or has information that their regime deems valuable. And we have seen that in some cases, yes, they do conduct ransomware attacks or malware theft or malware as a service if they believe it's financially prudent. So we've noticed and identified that they are operating in at least Shenyang, Dandong, Vladivostok, and Vientiane. And they're operating in small teams. Think of like 5 to 10 workers, and they're operating out of 1 or 2 rooms in like an apartment. So they don't have giant complexes. They could be literally someone's next door neighbor. And they pretty much live and work in these tiny little rooms. And they have an overseer, a handler, who makes sure that these workers are staying on topic, that they do their job, and that they're not getting their ideology polluted. And they maintain the Juche ideology, and they're not going to defect or run away and go rogue. And to facilitate this, obviously North Koreans cannot just operate independently in another country. They can't walk in and open a bank account in Russia or China. So they typically need a shell company or an established legitimate company to help facilitate them, so they can move the money into bank accounts that these companies own or operate, or that the companies open for their purposes, and it helps them launder the money and evade financial, traditional financial checks. So if a bank doesn't automatically say, this brand new company is earning tons of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, doesn't automatically raise a red flag if it's operating under established companies. So I'm going to kind of broadly speak how this scheme works. During this, we're talking about laptop farms. laptop farms operating in countries like the United States. So North Koreans will find somebody who is willing to let their address and be used to receive laptops and set them up. And so North Koreans will find anyone. They found, we're going to talk about someone, Christina Marie Chapman is a really famous example, where she had dozens of laptops, and we'll see some pictures later. And she was allowing North Koreans to use her location. And she sets up the laptops for them. And then North Koreans, once they have that established, they need to find someone who has an identity. So they can either, some people steal it, or sometimes people sell it, I should say. Sometimes people willingly lend it. There was an incident, the Department of Justice in the United States just released an indictment about 4 days ago. A United States soldier was selling his identity and allowing North Koreans to use his identity. Other times they'll steal it. Stealing the identity is a little easier nowadays with so many leaked credentials, leaked national ID numbers, social security numbers, and other personal information. Once they can get this identity established, they need to find a job. So they go through all this process, and we'll talk about some more of their specifics later, but they find a remote job, and then they start working. This could take weeks or months, as anyone who's been looking for a job in the past year knows. It takes a while. But once they get that, they have a few choices. They either complete the contract or work full-time. We have found that North Koreans in this field are sometimes working on contracts, a one-off job, building a website for $500 or $1,000, maybe some small coding projects, work for a month, and then that's it. Other times, what they really like to do is get hired full-time. So with these laptop farms, ideally, they will be working full-time in this country, for example, the United States. I found one identity that worked at least 1 year. So we see that they are definitely in this for the long haul. They don't just want to get one paycheck and leave. And alternatively, instead of just working, maybe they say, okay, this paycheck isn't big enough. Let me now deploy malware or ransomware and make this company pay me to unlock their systems. So that's a quicker payday, kind of a lot easier, and they can move on to the next target. Alternatively, they steal the information. This information can be anything that the regime deems valuable. Nuclear secrets, obviously, weapons, troop deployments, government secrets, information that governments have on them. They'll love it, they'll take it. But it could be smaller information that maybe is useful to the regime for one specific state goal and not necessarily just the big things like the nuclear program. And then finally, they have to get the money out. So traditionally, if you're going through a traditional financial network, the person who set up the laptop farm will be receiving paychecks, operating these bank accounts, and they will send the money overseas. Either wire transfers directly to another bank account, or they will alternatively get a bill of sale. They'll say, oh, I have to pay this company in Russia or China to send a large sum of money. So it doesn't automatically trigger the red flags in at least the United States financial system and banking system. Or if they get paid in cryptocurrency, which we all know North Korea loves, they'll just use a cryptocurrency mixer, wash it, get the cryptocurrency or Bitcoin or whatever they're using, get it to a wallet they control, and then they go from there. On the last point, we have seen that North Korea will sit on some of this cryptocurrency for 6 months, a year, 2 years before they use it. We can't say exactly why they do that. They have their own reasons for doing that.
Okay, so let's dive into how North Korean IT workers actually operate. The way we have visibility into this, to be entirely clear up front, is through legal proprietary methods. We have obtained infostealer malware logs from dark web sources that we have attributed to victim machines that are run by North Korean IT workers. So we are able to see full logins, search histories, communications between IT workers, their networks, the accounts they register, and the schemes that they run. So as my colleague had mentioned previously, North Korean IT workers run between 5 and 6 different personas at once. We did metadata analysis of 100 InfoStealer logs that were leaked on dark web sources and found that approximately 6 is the average amount of personas. However, we have seen North Korean IT workers run 1 to 2 personas at once, and in one specific case attributed to a fake persona named Mike Lemonis here, an actor was running 27 different personas at the same time, in which those 27 personas were all applying for different contracts on freelancing services like Upwork, Fiverr, Freelancer, and so forth. So this is a really good case study. So what we have in these two images is a GitHub profile called Great Blue Knight that was registered with an email account called mikecreative@gmail.com. This mikecreative@gmail.com was linked to a persona on Upwork or Fiverr named Mike Lemonis, who was applying to hundreds of contract positions in the United States, Canada, and throughout the European Union. He had completed approximately $500,000 worth of contract work and was working on behalf of the North Korean regime. So this fantasy knight or Great Blue Knight persona that you see on the top picture was the primary GitHub account that Mike Lemonis used to prove that he was an adept software developer, coder, web developer. This specific account, when we looked at the InfoStealer logs, linked to that Gmail, mikecreative@gmail.com, revealed over 27 different GitHub accounts using the same profile imagery, the same naming scheme, often with fantasy-themed lures, the same bios, the same badges for technologies that this actor had worked for, all linked to the same individual, the same fake persona. We ended up doing further analysis on dark web sources, specifically looking at leaks of personally identifiable information, so things like social security numbers, driver's licenses, and other credential leaks, and found that Mike Lemonis is indeed a real person whose identity had been stolen by a North Korean IT worker and then used to apply to jobs on freelancing sites. So typically what we see with North Korean IT workers, just within our field of view, is that aliases mix a combination of Western names. So about 50% of all of the IT workers we have identified in that metadata analysis of 100 logs mix Western names, particularly when targeting North America, or Slavic names or Slavic resembling names, particularly those purporting to be of Ukrainian ancestry when targeting European organizations. The other 25% that we see is Japanese names used to target organizations in the Asia Pacific. So obviously a massive operational security mistake on behalf of the North Korean IT workers is that whenever we see a North Korean IT worker registering accounts on GitHub, LinkedIn, Medium, Fiverr, and so forth, they often use the same email account to register for dozens of different personas across dozens of different sources, which allows us to see one email address and all of the GitHub accounts, all of the contract work, all of the social media accounts leaked to that one specific persona. So we'll show some more examples later, but this is a great case study to keep in the back of your mind when we're talking about how they run these scams simultaneously. It's often due to sloppy operational security. So going through the InfoStealer logs, we see a lot of really interesting things in the search history on behalf of these IT workers. First and foremost, constant, nonstop use of ChatGPT in order to answer interview questions, complete contract work, and correspond with their Western colleagues. And I say colleagues in parentheses because those are the victim organizations and not necessarily their DPRK IT worker teams. We also see the use of enhanced CV for resume generation, so ChatGPT to generate what fits a contract on Upwork or Fiverr, and then enhanced CV in order to generate a resume. We see the constant use and visiting of face swap in InfoStealer logs in order to create deepfake filters for live calls, which the previous presentation talked about extensively. We also see the use of AI-generated headshots, a lot of minions for some reason, and a lot of anime profile pictures. So particularly Naruto, Bleach, and Dragon Ball Z on hundreds and hundreds of North Korean IT worker personas. We also see the reuse of common biographical information within these GitHub accounts, so that hand-waving developed some AI apps and integrated with ChatGPT with the smiley face emoji. We identified on over 271 GitHub accounts linked to North Korean IT workers. So they copy and paste the same exact thing and put it on every single profile. It makes it very easy to identify when exactly these accounts are operating. You see, obviously, in these two images, both of these attributed to North Korea, the hello, wave, who am I, which also appears on every single GitHub account. We see often reused visual templates and icons across accounts, which once you start to recognize this behavior, it makes it actually relatively easy to identify what this particular threat activity looks like when it's active on GitHub.
So we're going to go over some kind of red flags that you might see during an interview process or even the application process. As my colleague said, they love to use AI. So a lot of times they'll wait for AI to say, okay, here's what the question is. Now here's what you should respond. And so this isn't just like a 2-second delay. If you're in a video interview with someone and they're waiting 5 or 10 seconds just staring at the screen, then yeah, it's not just them frozen. They're probably waiting for ChatGPT or another LLM to say, hey, here's what a good answer sounds like. The other indicator, they are working a 9 to 5, putting that in quotes, but in China, in Russia, in Laos. So that's GMT +8, or about 12 to 14 hours time zone difference between their time and the East Coast of the United States. So for example, if a firm in New York is interviewing somebody and it's 10 o'clock in the morning, in wherever the IT workers are located, it's probably closer to 8 p.m., so it's dark out. So they might have a fake background up. Or if they don't, it might look pretty dark. It's like, why is it dark? You're supposed to be in America. It's not nighttime, it's during the day. And then the other thing is, because they are operating overseas, sometimes there's just consistent poor video quality, lots of lag, and they try to have other things to conceal some other effects that take up all their bandwidth because they're operating in locations that may not have as good of bandwidth as you would have if you were in Japan, South Korea, or the West. So we track the DPRK IT workers collectively as Purple Delta. And so, as my colleague said, we got a lot of information from the InfoStealer logs. And if you see in the top picture there, that's actually a screenshot that we got from one of their computers. And they're open up in a Telegram channels, and they're looking for, ChatGPT help. How do I find remote jobs? How do I maintain 2 or 3 remote jobs at the same time? How do I find contract work? And if you notice on the right, that is Astral VPN. That's one of their favorite programs that they use. So we were able to see a lot of what they were doing. And we also noticed, again, they were heavily focused on AI. They have this big obsession with AI to augment their abilities to act as a force multiplier for them, to make it more efficient for them to get jobs, pass screening, and even work. And obviously, here's an example of the resume that they developed. This, at first glance, looks like your standard resume that you would get from anyone who's applying for a job. Same with the cover letter. It isn't outrageous. They are not the Nigerian prince scams where they have a lot of mistakes. They are trying to look like the best candidate. So they're trying to have the best work. And yes, they do manage about 5 to 6 personas. They will all apply for the same job. And different workers don't coordinate. So one cluster might be applying for one job, and another cluster might also be applying for those same jobs. So we've seen evidence of 15, I think, North Korean DPRK IT workers applying for the same roles at the same companies. So it could be 15 different workers, or it could be like 3 or 4 guys managing multiple accounts.
So here are some common tools that exist within a DPRK IT worker's environment. Nothing that you don't already know: Visual Studio, VS Code, AnyDesk in order to facilitate remote desktop connections. But what we see in approximately 93% of the logs that we have analyzed is Astral VPN is the tool of choice for DPRK IT workers. 2 tools that we also have called out here are callapp.exe and callrt.exe, which are used for remote management by the remote IT worker's handler. So these 2 tools are effectively espionage tools that exfiltrate information and conduct remote access on behalf of a worker's supervisor. Both of these tools were detected by recorded future malware intelligence. So in our own portal, we have created signatures for these and identified them on over 500 devices worldwide. So you think, again, over 500 devices worldwide, teams work in pairs of 2 or up to 10 total teams. They maintain between 5 and 6 personas each. You're dealing with over 10,000 IT workers just based on our signatures for callapp and callrt.exe. We also see various RDP tools and shell tools, but something that we thought was actually quite funny is when we were looking at the infected devices, we found a lot of humorous or inside joke named devices that were within North Korean systems, as well as, so I'm sure you've heard the mitigation that if you think you're dealing with a North Korean IT worker, you ask them to say something disparaging about Kim Jong-un. We have seen devices named Kim Jong-un in order to combat against this specific mitigation. We see devices named Apple running Windows. We see devices named Windows on OS 10. It's actually quite funny to see in real time, but there's other tools that are listed there, mostly in order to complete their day-to-day operations, but particularly in order to communicate with one another. They use something called IP Messenger, which is a messaging application between North Korean IT workers. So what we observed in the history and the chat logs related to these IT workers is that they report to local supervisors on a daily or weekly basis. Usually at the beginning of the day, they will conduct check-ins. So they will ask, the supervisor will ask which projects you're working on, which companies you are working for. And in some cases, we've seen some really interesting commentary where an IT worker would say, I am working for an Egyptian critical infrastructure provider, and the supervisor will say, exfiltrate everything you possibly can before the contract has been terminated. That is because any obvious information on behalf of the DPRK that is of interest, particularly in the critical infrastructure space, is of interest to North Korean IT workers as well. We also had access to a lot of their Google Sheets and their Google documents, which indicated their expense reports. We see them domestically, particularly in Vladivostok, buying things like basketballs, volleyballs, video games, software subscriptions, movies, music, and so forth with some of the money that they had earned, which indicates that some of it also is for personal use as well as funding that is sent back through their handler to the regime. One of the really interesting examples that we saw was pulled from a Mystic Stealer log. We found an operator whose name was Dream, who ran over 12 different personas and was completing over $100,000 worth of remote work, who was living in Vladivostok using Astral VPN, a US node that was based in Dallas, Texas. When we were looking at Dream's work history and what he had been buying and his Amazon history, he really liked basketball. So he was buying Michael Jordan jerseys, basketball shoes, basketballs themselves, signed basketballs from the United States, and then sending money back to the regime with the work of his handler. So pivoting really quickly to what Purple Bravo is. So we talked about Purple Delta, and now we're going to talk about Purple Bravo and how it intersects. If you're not familiar with Recorded Future's naming scheme for advanced persistent threats, purple refers to North Korea. That's because the flag colors red and blue form purple. Red would be China, blue for Russia, green for Iran, and so forth. But Purple Bravo is another cluster of activity linked to the Reconnaissance General Bureau that is linked to fake recruiter operations. It has some overlap with what's commonly referred to as contagious interview. However, there's not a one-to-one relationship. What we see with Purple Bravo is the deployment of specific malware like Beavertail, Invisible Ferret, and Otter Cookie, which are 3 bespoke backdoors and info stealers used on behalf of the DPRK, primarily in order to conduct industrial espionage and cryptocurrency theft. So we see Purple Bravo active across South Asia, in particular, India and Pakistan being the 2 most commonly targeted countries, followed by the United States, with Japan being 10th on the list. Now, most of our network traffic analysis on Beavertail and Invisible Ferret command and control infrastructure links to upstream accounts and server infrastructure in China, but that is not the most interesting part of Purple Bravo. You would think that contagious interview is often separate from remote IT workers. They're often kept separate in clustering, in tracking, and they're different in reporting. However, the piece of newsworthiness that we have today is that we have identified infrastructure showing that Purple Delta and Purple Bravo actually operate within the same command and control infrastructure. So the remote IT workers that everyone's been talking about for the last few years, in addition to the contagious interview campaign, both share infrastructure based in Russia, both share malware staging infrastructure. We see the overlap in Astral VPN nodes. We see overlaps in personas, social media accounts, personas working as DPRK IT workers and as recruiters at the same time. And we also see them operating from the same Chinese and Russia-based networks, particularly in Vladivostok. So a really good case study here is what's called, what we track as the True Means GitHub group. So what we see under the True Means GitHub group is a Purple Delta persona that was primarily looking for freelancing work on Upwork, Fiverr, and so forth, using the same email address to register accounts for a Purple Bravo persona that was used to run code challenges targeting cryptocurrency organizations in India. So obviously a recruiter will reach out to a software developer and they will send a GitHub repository saying, hey, run this code challenge as part of your job interview, and that GitHub repository contains DPRK-linked malware like Beavertail. We have noticed that DPRK remote IT workers and Purple Bravo personas are using the same infrastructure on GitHub, on LinkedIn, in addition to that actual command and control infrastructure, Astral VPN nodes, and so forth. So this does demonstrate overlapping operators and shared toolkits. The real interesting headline piece here is that this is really the first time Recorded Future has identified 2 separate sets of intrusion activity, both linked to the DPRK, both operating within the same network and in the same geographical region in Vladivostok, which suggests that these 2 sets of activity and these 2 campaigns operate within the same command structure as other forms of DPRK activity. My colleague also alluded to other forms of threat activity like ransomware. So we've also seen, actors linked to Moonstone Sleet deploying Holy Ghost ransomware. We have also seen infrastructure overlaps there as well. in addition to what we track as Purple Alpha or Kimsuki, primarily a espionage group targeting South Korea, we have also seen infrastructure overlaps with Purple Delta and Purple Bravo. So this suggests that all of the purple groups, despite attempts to stay siloed and despite operational security steps in order to make sure that none of these groups are attributed to the same chain of command, they are in fact operating within the same command structure based on the fact that the servers are the same, the Astral VPN nodes are the same, the infrastructure used on social media is the same, and so forth. So it allows us to take all of those naming clusters that we have, those APTs linked to the DPRK from Purple Alpha to Delta, and link them all under the same exact umbrella and make sure that they are all attributed to the North Korean RGB.
And so now we see kind of a quick example. So the top picture is actually from a North Korean, the DPRK IT worker laptop farm run by Christina Marie Chapman. And her laptop farm earned about $17 million over the course of 3 years. And as you see, she just has a bunch of shelves and a bunch of laptops, and she would leave them plugged in all day, and she would install things like AnyDesk on there. Oh. So then the North Korean workers would just log in remotely, and they would just go about their work. And when we say this, she earned $17 million for about 108 identities. And I went through all the publicly accessible court documents, and there were a lot of names in there, a lot of stolen identities. Some people willingly lent their identities as part of this. But they're using, she would take this money and she would send it through various bank accounts back to Russia and China. And that's how they got the money out of the United States. And as I mentioned previously, yes, they are using this money for state strategic goals. Missiles, ballistic missiles specifically, nuclear program, and other offensive cyber operations. Now, this is not the only economic engine of the DPRK. Obviously, they have a GDP of estimated, I believe it's like $32 billion last year. So $600 million a year isn't chump change for them, but it's not their biggest economic growth. And so this is kind of some of the long-term implications. What we found is that this isn't just a one-off or a few companies. Dozens of companies are unknowingly hiring North Korean DPRK IT workers. And they are going after many key industries, software development, AI, if you're an AI developer, if you are working with AI, they're trying to get in that space. Financial technology, crypto. If you are in the crypto space, they are going after you. They're not necessarily right now, but North Koreans love to go after cryptocurrency, anyone, cryptocurrency games, cryptocurrency trading platforms. If you have any crypto, they'll go for it. And so kind of what this is going is this is also affecting not just one company. Company A might have phenomenal security. They might say, no, we never have a North Korean IT worker. We have such good checks. But their vendor might not. They might have a third-party contractor who does not have such robust checks. And that's how North Koreans also infiltrate. And it's creating a lot of long-term trust issues, not just in contractors and vendors, but a lot of open source repositories that we're seeing. And so kind of one of the last slides here. I went over some of these, the kind of the human level indicators before, but one of the last ones, I'd like to bring your attention to the last one there. Instead of, like Alex said, oh, insult Kim Jong-un. Well, they're not stupid. They don't do that anymore. Ask them, yeah, what do you do on the weekend? How was that football game? What do you think about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce? Sorry, that's very American, but it's something that they would not be able to answer that question convincingly because they are working 12+ hour days. They might have some time off, not a lot. So we see what little downtime they have. I think we saw one was about a guy had 5 minutes. He took a 5-minute break in the whole day. So he was working about 14 hours straight. So they probably can't answer this question. And this is a normal interview question that normal applicants should be able to answer.
So also nothing that nobody here doesn't already know, but when we're looking at technical indicators here, Astral VPN nodes are going to be really important. As we said, when we did meta-analysis of North Korean IT worker infostealer logs, we found in over 90% of those infostealer logs and in those network traffic communications that Astral VPN was the DPRK IT worker tool of choice. Call RT, as I already had mentioned, there are a lot of public samples that are available. Please contact us if you're looking for specific indicators of compromise associated with that tool. We will happily share over all of those raw IOCs. Things like the Dolphin Anti-Detect browser on endpoints. We see Dolphin Anti-Detect. It's a black hat affiliate marketing tool in order to tab between different personas and different sessions. That, again, is going to be another indicator of DPRK IT worker work. Obviously, any communication with known Astral IPs is going to be important. Email reuse is also incredibly important. As I mentioned earlier, that's the MikeCreative0908@gmail.com that began this entire investigation. That one specific actor had used over 27 personas to earn $500,000 from over 300 organizations around the world. So correlating that email reuse, especially on resumes, in communications with prospective IT workers, is going to be really important because some of these most basic mitigations are often overlooked when hiring remote IT workers into your infrastructure. And then finally, checking GitHub content reuse and cloned profiles. As we mentioned earlier, there are hundreds of cloned GitHub repositories with the same exact projects, the same exact bios, some of the same exact profile pictures that are used over and over by remote IT workers, often within the same cluster of activity that are targeting the same organizations. That image that I have at the bottom is a deobfuscated code from a Purple Bravo GitHub repository that when it is deobfuscated, it shows the C2 infrastructure for Beavertail malware, again, openly on many GitHub repositories. When we did a quick search of GitHub in our own collections for that base 64 string that contains the Beavertail C2, we found over 40 different GitHub repositories that were openly accessible to the public with this same exact string in it. And again, that contains a DPRK malware sample. Cool. So next. These are all directly pulled from the FBI. These are your organizational countermeasures. I'm sure they have been circulated about quite often in our spaces as well as in the previous presentation, but the FBI recommends to compare LLM samples to various answers that DPRK IT workers give in interview responses. Obviously, asking the applicant to move their hand in front of the face during the job interview defeats things like face swap. We have worked with various organizations where this very simple interviewing tool actually did work in identifying several DPRK IT workers. Obviously, do not ship a laptop or any other company device to a new hire located in a different country. This has been a big pain point for organizations in the United States who primarily work on remote work post-COVID, but asking a potential hire to come to an office and pick up a physical piece of hardware at a physical location also defeats DPRK IT worker scams. Obviously, checking that addresses are legitimate and that there are individuals located at that specific location provided by the applicant is really important. That also defeats IT workers. Obviously, monitoring any infrastructure for DPRK-linked software and network traffic is going to be really important. And again, as I mentioned before, Astral VPN nodes, call app, call RT, and so forth are immediate indicators of purple delta activity. So this is going to be one of the most important things to look at.
Yeah. So now what's next, right? Obviously, they're obsessed with AI, so they can continue with it. As everyone here has heard many talks and presentations about AI, many of us work with it on a daily basis. It's not going away. they're going to continue trying to use it, trying to learn how to use it to augment their abilities. It's unlikely that North Korea will suddenly develop their own version of ChatGPT. It's theoretically possible, but yeah, I don't want to say it won't happen. Never say never. But they're likely to try and find a way to use existing LLMs, existing AIs that they could get public access to, how to leverage it to their maximum efficiency. Blockchain, like I said, cryptocurrency space. They are going to live in there. I think the FBI said over half of all cryptocurrency thefts in the world are North Korea. So that's hundreds of millions of dollars a year just from that. And a defense contract, freelancing. Again, if you are a defense contractor, if they can't get into the CIA, they will go for the CIA's contractor. And they will use these things. They will use these tools to continue to better develop deep fakes. As Alex said, yes, moving your hand in front of your face on camera tends to stop those face filters for now. What happens in 6 months or 18 months as that gets better? So we need to be aware of that and how to find new countermeasures for that. We also know that they're very likely going to continue operating in places like Russia, China, Laos, countries that have good political relations with North Korea. So obviously, they're not going to be in the West, but they will continue working to try and find employment in the West or anyone sympathetic. And they will continue to rely on compromised Western personal information to pass the background checks. Like I said, it's great to have someone give you information, give you their social security number or national ID number. But with so many leaked credentials now, they could just go to some dark web forums, buy them or steal them themselves. And that's how they're very likely going to continue this scheme as long as it's profitable.
Okay, final parting thought here. We need to emphasize that the IT worker program is actually a hybrid of espionage, sanctions evasion, and cybercrime. People often overlook the espionage aspect of this, but we at Recorded Future have seen defense industrial base targeted, governments targeted, technology companies targeted, and critical infrastructure providers around the world infiltrated with North Korean IT workers. Again, they don't need to maintain persistence through a back door. They have persistence because they are working at that organization. This is again emphasizing that the regime has weaponized this remote work economy. We see most activity from North Korean IT workers begin in 2021 when remote IT work became incredibly popular following the COVID-19 pandemic. But we again emphasize that final piece about IT worker sanctions evasion and espionage. Those IT workers are not hacking your company. They are not conducting traditional forms of intrusion. They are working for your company and then stealing the information and sending it back to a handler that funnels it back to the regime. So as we continue to say, intelligence sharing is important. If you have any questions about this activity or you're looking for specific IOCs, we have tens of thousands of IOCs in the form of email addresses, IP addresses, and so forth linked to remote IT workers that we are openly sharing with anyone here that are all TLP white that you can use within your organization in order to defend against this. Please find us afterwards if you have any questions, but I thank you so much for being here, and if you need any specific materials from us, please reach out via email or find us at the networking party, and we will send you IOC lists, report lists that are all, as of right now, no longer under embargo and are all publicly available. So thank you, and please come find us if you have any questions.